The plot picks up around 2 years after the events of Avengers: Age of Ultron, 2015.
Thor, Chris Hemsworth, having failed in his mission to get the Infinity Stones and being ditched by Jane, though he swears it was a mutual dumping, is chained above a fire pit before being hauled before the enormous fire demon Surtur. Surtur believes that it is his destiny to bring about Ragnarok, the total destruction of Asgard. Surtur informs Thor that Odin, Anthony Hopkins, is not on Asgard, so Thor uses Mjolnir, his hammer, to flee and slay Surtur while retaining his crown/skull, the demon's power source. Thor returns to Asgard and transports Surtur's skull to the vaults, only to discover that Heimdall, Idris Elba, has been replaced as sentinel of the Bifrost Bridge by the inept Scourge, Karl Urban, who says that Odin accused Heimdall of betrayal.
Heimdall afterwards departed, and his whereabouts are unknown.
Thor arrives in Asgard to see a gigantic statue of Loki, Tom Hiddleston, and Odin reclining around, watching a performance commemorating Loki's heroic sacrifice while fighting the Dark Elves. Thor soon forces Loki, who had usurped and disguised himself as Odin previous to the end of Thor, the Dark World, to discard his masquerade and demands to know what happened to Odin. Loki is revealed to have cast a spell on Odin and abandoned him in a retirement home in New York City. By the time they arrive, it has been demolished. Loki is sucked through a dimensional hole in the sidewalk before they can plan their next move, and a card with an address, 177A, Bleecker Street, is left behind. Thor goes there and meets Dr. Stephen Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch, Earth's magical guardian, who agrees to assist him in his search for Odin on the condition that all Asgardians leave Earth. Thor agrees, and Dr. Strange deduces that Odin is in Norway after some investigation, during which Thor is continually moved around Strange's sanctum, a disturbing experience. He then frees Loki from his never-ending fall, and when Loki tries to assault an irritated Strange, the Doctor throws them both through another portal. They discover Odin in Norway, seated near a picturesque cliff, having broken Loki's enchantment, and he acknowledges that he is dying and that Ragnarok is nearing. Thor insists that by destroying Surtur, he averted Ragnarok. Odin mentions Hela, Cate Blanchett, his actual firstborn child, the goddess of death who would take Asgard from Odin's sons.
Odin informs Thor and Loki that their unknown sister was entirely engulfed by darkness and shut away, and that the only force keeping her exile alive is Odin himself. Before dying and departing, he apologizes to Thor for failing him. Hela emerges from her confinement as soon as he leaves and engages the two in brief small talk. Thor tosses Mjolnir at her since she will not be reasoned with, but the goddess easily catches and shatters the long indestructible weapon. Loki, knowing that they have little hope, requests that they be sent to Asgard via the Bifrost, but Hela also enters the portal, expels Loki and then Thor from it at various points, and arrives at Asgard. When she arrives to the Bifrost Bridge, she quickly murders Volstagg, Ray Stevenson, and Fendrel, Zachary Levi, before enlisting the help of a horrified Scourge. She then travels to Asgard, where she kills the entire Royal Guard as well as Hogun, Tadanobu Asano, by herself. Thor is dropped by the portal on Sakaar, a planet that appears to be entirely made up of vast garbage mounds supplied by giant portals in the sky. Several scavengers attack him. He is rapidly overpowered without a weapon before his attackers are scared off by the hard-drinking bounty hunter Valkyrie, Tessa Thompson. She then grabs Thor, placing a small shocking device around his neck to calm him down, and takes him to the Grandmaster, Jeff Goldblum, who is overjoyed with his new acquisition and decides to pit him against his champion fighter. Thor discovers that Loki is also present and has been there for weeks. Time moves much faster on the Grandmaster's world, during which he has gained the Grandmaster's favor. Loki pretends not to care about his brother in order not to jeopardize his position, and Thor is imprisoned into the dungeons, where he encounters the rock creature Korg, who tells that all who have gone up against the champion have been killed. Meanwhile, Hela enters Asgard's throne room and pulls down the fresco above the throne depicting Odin and the royal family and their benevolent rule of their kingdom and the universe, revealing Asgard's darker history in which Odin and Hela conquered the 9 realms before being banished by her father. Hela then descends into Asgard's vaults, where she uses Asgard's eternal flame to resurrect her entire army and her gigantic wolf, Fenris. She also considers the Infinity Gauntlet held there as a forgery. She then tries to open a portal and conquer all realms, but the Bifrost sword has been grabbed by Heimdall, who has been hidden in the hills and is now sheltering Asgard's fleeing citizens. Thor is led to the arena and pitted against the champion, who turns out to be none other than the Incredible Hulk. Thor is ecstatic to see his old teammate, but the Hulk attacks him. Thor gains the upper hand as the two bash each other around the area. He tries to use Natasha Romanoff's calming technique to turn back into Bruce Banner, Mark Ruffalo, but it fails and Hulk thrashes him. Loki is shaken to see the beast that dealt him a sound beating during his attempted conquest of Earth. Thor eventually gives up and starts fighting, receiving a vision of Odin that causes him to channel raw lightning at one point. However, just as he is about to win the Grandmaster, Thor is shocked into surrender since he does not want to see a crowd and his own favorite be defeated. Thor puts his hand up in defense as the Hulk soars into the air to crush him before everything goes black. Hela has gathered the remaining Asgardians and demands the location of the Bifrost sword. When no one steps forward, Hela orders Scourge to execute a random individual. Scourge hesitates but is still going to commit the murder, but before he can, someone steps forward with Heimdall's location. Thor awakens later in the Hulk's chamber, surrounded by gorgeous women. Thor speaks privately with Hulk, who can now communicate far more eloquently than he could in his previous appearance, and discovers that he hasn't turned back into Banner since leaving Earth 2 years ago. The Hulk points them that the Quinjet he used to leave Earth is still intact and might be utilized to flee. He also discovers that Valkyrie is an Asgardian who was part of an elite all-female group sent up against Hela during her previous invasion but were all slaughtered, Valkyrie being the sole survivor. Thor tries to persuade her to assist, but she first refuses. Although Hulk is content with his life and wishes to stay, he does assist Thor in obtaining the control device for his electronic confinement, which Thor steals from Valkyrie and removes the shocker from his neck. Thor flees Hulk's apartment and finds the Quinjet, but is pursued by Hulk, who smashes it in half. Thor then plays Black Widow's Scarlett Johansson final message to him from Avengers: Age of Ultron 2015, forcing the Hulk to revert to Bruce Banner. Thor recounts what has occurred to Banner, whose final recollections are of Sokovia during Ultron's offensive. Banner, unwilling to believe Hulk was able to maintain control for 2 years, refuses to transform again, knowing that if he does, he may become the Hulk indefinitely. Valkyrie meets Loki and the two have a brief struggle. After Loki learns where she hails from, he uses his powers to make her remember her previous experience with Hela. Valkyrie has a change of heart and decides to assist Thor in returning to Asgard, and she demonstrates her goodwill by beating and chaining Loki. Thor and Loki reunite to steal a ship, but Loki attempts to betray Thor to the Grandmaster. Thor, anticipating Loki's approach, lays the stunning device on Loki's back. Thor informs his brother that he had thought Loki would show some ability for growth and even begin to change for the better, but that Loki would always be a trickster. He then turns on the shocking gadget and places the control just out of reach. Thor, Banner, and Valkyrie take the Grandmaster's party/orgy ship and flee through the Devil's Anus to avoid the Grandmaster's clutches. Thor arrives at Asgard just as Hela is preparing to destroy the surviving populace who had attempted to flee over the Bifrost Bridge, and engages her in a fierce battle, but is still defeated and loses an eye. Thor, feeling useless without his hammer, sees Odin, who explains to his son that the hammer just channeled his energies, reminding him that he is the god of thunder. Odin also assures him that Asgard is a people, not a place, and that they may re-establish their society and culture anyplace. Thor, being fully aware of his skills, releases a tremendous lightning bolt that repels Hela. While Valkyrie and Heimdall fight Hela's army, Loki joins forces with Korg and other escaping fighters to obtain a ship, which he uses to evacuate the Asgardians. To combat Fenris, Banner also changes back into the Hulk. Scourge, feeling guilty over his alliance with Hela, sacrifices himself to ensure the ship's escape. Thor joins forces with Valkyrie and Loki, knowing that Hela will soon return, strengthened by Asgard's power. Thor realizes that he cannot avert Ragnarok and must instead bring it about in order to destroy Hela, and sends Loki down to the vaults to toss Surtur's skull into the eternal flame. Loki does so and flees. It's also heavily indicated that he takes use of the opportunity to steal the Tesseract, just as Surtur is reborn and begins wreaking havoc on the land. Hela launches an attack, but it is futile. Surtur is far too powerful and destroys her with his blade. Thor, Loki, Hulk, Heimdall, Valkyrie, Korg, and the remaining civilians/prisoners flee before Asgard is fully destroyed. Although Thor is saddened by the devastation of his Asgard, he understands that it was necessary to save his people. He eventually meets his fate and ascends to the throne, the captain's chair on the bridge, where his first order is to return to Earth. Mid-credit scene, Loki is concerned about Thor's decision to return to Earth, knowing that he will not be welcomed there after attempting to take over the planet on his previous visit. Thor tells his brother that everything is alright, just as a terrifying spacecraft dwarfing their own arrives through the glass. After credit scene, the Grandmaster, who was pursuing Thor, crashes on the waste planet and is accosted by the scavengers, who are also a group of former slaves. He congratulates them on their rebellion and agrees to declare the game a tie.